Justin Keenan from the Go Set. Welcome to Noise 11, and I should start off by saying happy anniversary. I mean, we're hitting the 30th, not the 30th, the 20th anniversary of the band. Just about done there for a sec.
Yeah, that's right. It's actually passed by pretty quick. We certainly had no aspirations that it would be this, that we'd make this much music or that we'd continue for this long when we started. So it's a surprise to us as it is to anyone that we made it 20 years.
Yeah, well, 2023, we've got a new album. So you're out there talking about the new, but, will there be some sort of marking of the occasion of the 20th? Will there be a 20th anniversary performance, at least at one point?
Yeah, what we're actually thinking about doing is we're thinking about doing multiple sets. So we're thinking about doing 2 sets in 2 decades. So doing the first decade, the second decade, 2 different sets, and letting people choose, doing small limited cap rooms and getting people to choose what songs they want. So the people who come, so say they're limited to 100 tickets or something like that, the people who come can write the set list. Yep. We're thinking about recording those live over a period of, over a series of shows, and then putting them out so that people could listen to the live recording of the shows that they went to, and we play the 2 decades, so 2003 to 2013, and then from 14 to 23 in the second set.
Wow, that's a great idea. Is there actually a date that this band formed? We read the band formed in 2003. Was there an actual date where, yesterday you weren't and today you were?
Yeah, look, I'm not sure, but I know it was around about November. Mm-hmm. So that's about as close as I can get to it. I know that there was certainly a lot of drinking and speculating. So for a few days, that conversation kind of went on. So because the band effectively started, not as a joke, but certainly as just a fun idea, that we'd play kind of these folky songs that we grew up on mixed with kind of punk rock, and it was kind of a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek idea. So it was kind of something that we talked about, myself and the other guy who founded it, Mark Moran. We kind of talked about it over a lot of beers. It always came up after we'd had our 5th beer,
Mm-hmm. Was the name The Go Set related in any way to the old music magazine?
No, I get asked that a bit, actually. My dad asked me that when I first started the band. And no, it doesn't come from that at all. It's the Go Set is a reference to the kind of the prime time of the day, or in surfing terms, like the one set of the day that you would get. And so I previously had played music with a lot of guys who were kind of obsessed with surfing, and so had Mark. And so we were talking about, just the nature of playing fast music and stuff like that. So the Go Set was kind of like, it's the time of the day to go for it.
Right. What about the Celtic influences that were in this band? Because, I mean, you've had that sound since day one. But where did that come from in your head to kick you down that track?
Yeah, look, in both of our cases, we grew up on a fairly staple diet of it. So Mark's family are Irish. I listened to a lot of that stuff through, grandparents. And then I kind of enjoyed it. I've got to say, it always felt really natural. Like that 6/8 beat always felt really natural and rootsy and homely. Because I guess I'd heard a lot of it in the background, although I hadn't probably paid much attention to it. It had sunk in to, much like people talk about the sound of cricket define summer, the cricket on in the background. And I was kind of like that with Irish music. And it was always on these kind of little AM transistor radios in the kitchen. And there was always a smell of food, and there was all of that kind of stuff. So it kind of reminded me of that. And I guess the conversation about the band started when we started talking about, that music and how it kind of was the background to our, to growing up.
Well, I guess we had bands like the Pogues that were sort of forerunners to the Go Set. Did that sort of give you a musical marker as well?
Yeah, a little bit. When I went to uni, so I guess I didn't think anymore really about Irish music or that kind of folky stuff until much later on when I went to uni and I heard the Pogues. And I actually didn't hear the Pogues till I was about 18, and yeah, and then I kind of went back and was listening to the Furies and that kind of stuff, and then Weddings Parties Anything came out, and I remember seeing Weddings Parties Anything for $5 at the club in Collingwood, and a friend of mine said to me, and I've told this story a bit, but a friend of mine said to me, "I'll pay for you to get in," because I wasn't interested in going. He said, "I'll pay for you to get in. I know the music you're into, and this will change your life." And he was dead right. So I couldn't even play guitar at the time I saw Weddings Parties Anything, and they were everything that I wanted to make a band sound like.
I guess, you're starting off a rock and roll band, the elements are guitar, bass, drums. You've also got to then throw in the bagpipes. That's not an easy person to have in a band or replace.
No, that's right. Everything's tuned to kind of B flat and a third or B flat and a quarter, depending on the temperature of the room. So it's really hard to do studio recordings because they're so imperfect. They're so imperfect, but when you put multiple bagpipes together, they form this kind of chorus wall that's quite perfect. It's a really hard. It's quite a phenomenon, but the idea of the bagpipes came to me not originally, but in the 90s when I saw a band called the Real Mackenzies, and saw them when I was traveling around the US, kind of by accident. Ran into them and went, wow, that sounds great in a band. That would work really well with kind of, fiddles and accordions and all of that kind of stuff, and just distorted guitars. So yeah, and then because the Real Mackenzies, a lot of people don't know this, but the Real Mackenzies have been around almost as long as the Pogues. They've been around kind of, early 80s or something like that. And they predate Flogging Molly and the Dropkick Murphys and all these kind of more modern incarnations. The Real Mackenzies have been around for a long, long, long time, and they're Scottish-Canadian band, effectively a punk band, but and that was the first time I'd seen bagpipes really used to that effect. So that was kind of one of the inspirations for me. And I always loved the sound of the bagpipes. There's always something about an instrument that's used for war and funerals, like it's quite an emotional sort of instrument. And you see a lot of people get quite affected by the bagpipes.
And there's not that many bagpipe hits, is there, over the years? I mean, the two that come to mind in Australia, you're the voice, John Farnham, and It's a Long Way to the Top, AC/DC.
Yeah, and they tend to be an instrument that gets hidden. I know the church used bagpipes in Under the Milky Way, and they morphed their whole song around this bagpipe drone that goes all the way through it. So quite often bagpipes are used a little bit like Hammond organ or one of those kind of instruments that sits underneath a lot of other stuff. So it's there, but you don't know it's there.
Well, here we are with the 8th album, The Warriors Beneath Us. Eight albums. That's quite the catalogue, isn't it? That actually sits in a shelf like this now, does it?
Yeah, it's something to be proud of for sure. I mean, it depends how you want to measure music. If you measure it in terms of, we have places in the world where certainly we're more well known than others, but I guess depends how you want to measure, how you want to measure your career as a musician in terms of, diversity of projects or prolificness of, how much music you've kind of produced. And with us, one of the things that I'm really proud of is that we've kind of stuck to our guns, and I feel like we've got better at what we've done without trying to compromise what we do for a more commercial sort of version of ourselves. I mean, naturally, as you produce albums, you get better at recording and better at producing, and you get kind of slicker at knowing all the tricks to make things sound better on the ear. But we've really kind of stayed the course, I think, with regards to the way we write songs and what we've written songs about and what our sound is and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be proud of. Not many bands make 8 albums anymore.
Have you added up the number of songs you've recorded? As I'm sure you passed the 100 recorded songs benchmark as well.
Yeah, there's I've got because I've got songs. So I write. I've got a solo project as well. I've got about 125 songs that are kind of registered and published. So I guess it's a fair bit of content. One of the challenges actually with all of that is because we've never had one big hit or one big kind of album where people know 5 or 6 songs and they're the go-to, because we've got a lot of people that come to our shows have different favorite songs. So we've been trying to go and learn all of this catalog. And then once we started getting into it, went, holy shit, there's like 60 songs we're going to rehearse today. That's like we're going to be playing for 4 hours straight without a break just to rehearse these songs. So there's a lot of stuff to remember. That's a lot of verses and a lot of choruses and a lot of bridges and changes. And so that's the challenge for us now with the big catalog, is how we pull out those songs out of our hat at on request. And that's really challenging.
Oh, I think it's time to invest in the teleprompter.
Yeah, you might be right.
Yeah. As the main songwriter in the band, and you write about a lot of historic things, do you have to go through a fact-checking process after you've written a song just to make sure that what you're singing about from an historical perspective is actually correct?
Yeah, sometimes. It depends how. I basically fact-check if I use really prominent facts. If I'm kind of using a story, then you have creative license to create the character however you want. If you are talking about a particular event, and a lot of our songs have, time signature, they have time markers on them, and But I guess it's anything, the more literal you are, then the more correct you need to be with your facts. But with the less literal stuff, there's even kind of cases where you start writing a song and you've got 2 or 3 songs in the background, and they might go together into one story, because there's no, you're telling a story that can be fiction or non-fiction. So it can be elements of both. And some of our songs are even that, where they're kind of about 2 or 3 different things that are put together in one theme. So the theme might be around, waves of immigration, or, displacement, or, the socioeconomic cycle of certain groups of people. And it can be multiple small stories into one song.
Well, I guess a song like West Into the Sun, it could be about the Civil War. It could have been an episode of Game of Thrones.
Yeah, so it's funny you should say that, because that's kind of how that song ended up. It ended up being a bunch of different things that I've read, about effectively about the American Civil War, and how the English were promising everything to the South in terms of sending soldiers and sending, all kinds of stuff. And they, some way along there, got sidetracked by this preoccupation with defeating the French, and the Napoleonic Wars in that period had taken such a toll on the English that that they were unable to really support the South. And had they supported the South, it's arguable. Americans might suggest differently, but with an unbiased point of view, you could argue that war may have turned out really differently. And so the US, as we know it, might be completely different. But yeah, that's an example of a song where bits and pieces of a story, and then it just kind of sounded good. This kind of West Into the Sun sailing song just kind of sounded good. So I took creative license on that a bit.
Well, I guess same with The Warriors Beneath Us, the title track, and also one of the songs off the album, that has markers with the past as well.
Yeah, The Warriors Beneath Us is around this theme that, that I think that most people live this very entitled, very privileged kind of existence day to day, and they assume that the world that they've been brought into is the only world that ever existed. And the idea that the people that are buried under the ground and the layers of ground that exist beneath us And what kind of prompted this song a little bit was in Cologne, along the river, the Rhine, there's multiple layers of the city. So from the Roman Empire to the Prussians to all the way through to the First World War, where it had been leveled and then kind of just filled in, and then the Second World War leveled and filled in, and so on and so on. And now we live on this much higher. People in Cologne live on this much higher riverbank and you would never know that all of that stuff lay underneath you until archaeologists kind of dug down, and all of this history that had kind of piled up, and all of this, all of these carnage and kind of blood and sacrifice of all these previous generations to kind of create this world order that we've currently got, and we live in a prolonged period of peace, and that's because you would like to think anyway. There's a lot of lessons learned from the past, with the present situation in Ukraine being the obvious example where that might not be the case. Predominantly, we live in an era of peace because we don't kind of want that World War I, World War II style of carnage again. But that's right underneath our feet.
Yeah, I guess the Ghost Set aren't exactly known for their love songs, are they? But you have written one on this album, Horizons.
Yeah. Horizons is actually, I work with a lot of young people, Monday to Friday, and Horizons is effectively about trying to get out of your predisposition towards social groups or social, behaviors, and just trying to get away from these cycles that people find themselves in, and a lot of those cycles exist for really wealthy people and really poor people, and what we tend to normalize is what happens, as we grow up, and we kind of form our character around that. And so Horizons is a story of people that have fallen into this kind of way of existing, kind of being streetwise and kind of wheeling and dealing in stuff they shouldn't be, and then trying to work out how to get out of it, how to change their identity and get away.
Yeah, and the album ends with quite a nod to your influences with the Pogue song, The Sunny Side of the Street.
Yeah, we kind of toyed around with that a little bit and thought that might be nice, given that there's so many kind of depressing songs on there lyrically. Tomorrow is quite a depressing song lyrically, and there's kind of some union. We got the numbers is kind of a union song, and we kind of thought that the way to end might be a nod to the Pogues, as you say. And Sunny Side of the Street's always been one of my favourite songs. It's just one of those songs you can put on any time of the day or night, and just makes you kind of want to put you in a better mood. So I thought that might be a really nice way to end. So, now we've got to work out how to do it justice live.
Do you do many covers live?
We usually do. If we do say our standard show is about an hour and a half, we might do one or two. So, and they're usually something, depending on the audience, might do like a Wettos song, or we might do Long Way to the Top if it's that kind of audience that's having a party, or we might do a Radio Birdman song. So they're a kind of an influence of mine. I've always loved that band, and we were fortunate enough to work with Rob Younger on one of our albums. So so we tend to do those Australian bands, but we wouldn't do anything kind of probably more kind of Australian bands that are close to our hearts rather than anything that's a commercial cover.
You must have been like a kid in a candy store when Rob Younger was producing you.
Yeah, well, he stayed at my house for a couple of weeks, and he was quite a different character to what I thought, Rob. I thought he'd be quite the extrovert, and he'd love surfing and all of this kind of stuff. And he turned out not to be like that at all. He turned out to be quite the opposite of that, and quite very quiet, and but I loved my time with him. And you know, whenever you spend time with anyone who's been in the music industry that long and they've had that much touring experience and that much band experience, you know, even just the passive diffusion of stories they tell, you know, over a beer or two, you know, is just, I can't, you know, you can't soak it up enough. It's timeless. So yeah, so we really he produced the Hungry Mile album of ours, and I'll never forget that. It will always be really grateful to Rob for his work on that, which was largely around guitars, I've got to say. So the guitars are higher than everything on that album, and that's Rob Younger. So yeah, but no, we've been really lucky. We've worked with a lot of people in our 20 years, and yeah, been very fortunate.
You've also done an enormous amount of shows in those 20 years. I think 1,500 plus shows. So that averages out to about 75 shows a year. And that's not even taking into consideration we've had 3 years where you haven't been able to do anything. So, you know, there must have been some years in that 20-year period where you were constantly on the road.
Yeah, I think the most I've ever done in a year is a little bit over 200. But yeah, definitely with the Ghost Head. I mean, they're easy to clock up. If you go to Europe and you play, we quite often go to Europe. Up until COVID, we were going to Europe at least once a year, and we're going to North America at least once a year. So when you're there and you've paid for all those airfares and you've got that van on the road, you've got a driver, you've got a roadie, you've got, you know, people that are relying on the wages, you kind of have to work every night. So we would be working, we would fly into London and play the UK and then go to mainland Europe and play. We might play 30 nights straight, you know, we would literally get off the plane and play straight away, and we would go from show to show to show. It was never really a break. We had very, very few off nights, and so we'd be on tour for a month and cram 30 into that month. So in Australia, the touring's a little bit harder, obviously, because if you're an older band like us, our crew, our people who come out to see us, you know, they tend to want to do it on Friday and Saturday nights and Sunday afternoons. They don't tend to want to go out like uni crowds and, you know, like younger artists on a Wednesday or Thursday night. And, you know, we don't really have the population to support it either. I've said to people before, you know, we could probably get more people to a show in Hamburg on a Monday than we could in, you know, Sydney or Melbourne if we played on a Thursday, or even on a Friday or a Saturday sometimes. There's just the population there to support, to support bands. And the European audiences are also really loyal. So that's why we've kept coming back. And that's why those shows have kind of clocked up, because they grow. And when they grow, it's easy to keep motivated and positive about what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, it's a big year, 2023. You've got the 20th anniversary with the 8th album, The Warriors Beneath Us. And no doubt many dates on the road to come over coming months. So, Justin, good to see you here at Noise 11 today.
Yeah, thanks for the chat, Paul.